In the early morning, the mist rising from the Sea of Galilee would begin to fade, and the sun's rays would touch the hills where Jesus often chose to teach. On one such morning, a great crowd gathered, filled with those who had heard of Jesus' healing power, his wisdom, and his words that carried authority unlike any they had ever known. They came from far and wide, their hearts heavy with burdens, their lives filled with challenges, hoping that Jesus would provide guidance and understanding. With a heart full of compassion, Jesus climbed the hillside and began to speak, addressing them all with words that would form the foundation of his teachings, forever known as the Sermon on the Mount. This sermon would not only outline a path to peace and righteousness, but also provide a glimpse into the kingdom of heaven, revealing the heart of God and his deep love for humanity. Jesus began his message with blessings which many call the Beatitudes. These blessings were not for the rich or powerful, but for the poor in spirit, the meek, those who mourn, and those who hunger for righteousness. With these simple yet profound words, Jesus extended hope to the weary and the humble. He blessed those who had suffered, who had faced challenges and heartache, and who sought something greater than the fleeting promises of the world. His words echoed in the hearts of the people, assuring them that God's kingdom was not reserved for the elite, but was open to all who came with a humble heart and a desire for truth and goodness. Jesus taught that the poor in spirit, those who recognized their need for God, would find comfort and acceptance in God's kingdom. He promised that those who mourn would be comforted, and the meek would inherit the earth. His words offered a revolutionary message that God values humility, kindness, and mercy over pride and power. To those who hungered and thirsted for righteousness, Jesus promised fulfillment, assuring them that their desire to live in alignment with God's will would not go unnoticed. Each blessing was an invitation to draw closer to God, to seek his presence, and to find peace in his love. As Jesus continued, he spoke of the power of mercy and purity of heart. He said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy," encouraging all who listen to extend compassion and forgiveness to others. Jesus taught that showing mercy is a reflection of God's own nature, and those who forgive will, in turn, receive forgiveness. He emphasized that purity of heart is not just about actions, but about intentions. A heart that seeks goodness, kindness, and truth is a heart that reflects God's own character. He promised that those with a pure heart would see God, a promise that spoke to the deepest longing of the human spirit, a desire to be in communion with the divine. In a world filled with conflict and division, Jesus blessed the peacemakers, calling them the children of God. By promoting peace and unity, Jesus showed that the path to true peace is through reconciliation, forgiveness, and love. He encouraged his followers to bridge divides, to bring healing to fractured relationships, and to seek harmony in their communities. Jesus also acknowledged the challenges that come with living a life of faith. He blessed those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, promising them a place in the kingdom of heaven. His words were a comfort to those who faced opposition, reminding them that God sees their struggles and that their faithfulness would be rewarded. Jesus knew that following him would not always be easy, but he assured his followers that their commitment to righteousness would bring them into God's eternal embrace. Moving from blessings, Jesus then shared a powerful metaphor, calling his followers the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Salt, in its essence, preserves, heals, and brings out the true flavor in food. In the same way, Jesus called his followers to preserve the values of love, mercy, and righteousness in the world. He reminded them that their actions, rooted in faith, would help sustain the goodness of humanity and prevent moral decay. By living lives of integrity and compassion, they would bring a taste of God's love to those around them. Likewise, Jesus likened them to a light set on a hill, a light that could not be hidden. This light was a reflection of God's truth, shining brightly in a world often overshadowed by darkness. Jesus encouraged his followers to let their light shine, to live in a way that brought glory to God and guided others toward his love. Through this call to be salt and light, Jesus provided a vision of a world transformed by acts of kindness, generosity, and faith. His followers were to be beacons of hope, illuminating the path to God's kingdom. With wisdom and insight, Jesus then addressed the importance of fulfilling the law. He clarified that he had not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, to bring it to its true purpose. His teachings did not replace God's commandments, but brought a deeper understanding of them. Jesus showed that true obedience to God's law is not about rigid rule-keeping, but about a heart aligned with God's will. He emphasized that the law is a guide to love, mercy, and justice, and he encouraged his followers to live by its spirit rather than just its letter. Jesus went further, teaching that sin begins in the heart. He spoke against harboring anger, warning that unresolved anger can lead to deeper divisions and conflicts. By addressing the heart's intentions, Jesus called for a higher standard of love and forgiveness. He encouraged his followers to seek reconciliation, to forgive those who had wronged them, and to extend grace even when it was difficult. His message was clear: peace and unity come when we choose to let go of anger and embrace forgiveness. He also spoke about purity, teaching that true purity is a matter of the heart. Jesus urged his followers to guard their hearts and minds, to be intentional about their thoughts and actions. He encouraged them to honor their commitments and relationships, valuing the sanctity of marriage and fidelity. By calling for purity, Jesus taught that a heart aligned with God's values brings peace, not only to oneself, but also to others. He then addressed the topic of oaths, reminding his followers that integrity should be a natural part of their character. He taught that honesty requires no oath, for a truthful heart speaks with integrity in every situation. Jesus called for a life of honesty and transparency, where words and actions align with truth. One of the most challenging teachings Jesus gave was on loving one's enemies. He urged his followers to go beyond the natural inclination to seek revenge and instead respond with love and forgiveness. Jesus called them to love not only their neighbors, but also those who oppose them. His command to love enemies was a radical call to demonstrate God's love in a profound way. He reminded his followers that God's love is unconditional and extends to all people, both good and evil. By loving their enemies, they would reflect God's character and bring peace into their lives. Jesus also warned against performing acts of righteousness for the sake of public approval. He taught that giving, praying, and fasting should be done quietly, as acts of love toward God, not as a means to gain recognition from others. Jesus encouraged sincerity in faith, teaching that God sees the heart and rewards those who seek him in humility. Through the Lord's Prayer, Jesus offered a model of prayer that emphasized God's sovereignty, provision, forgiveness, and protection. This prayer captured the essence of faith, trust, and dependence on God. It was a simple yet profound way of connecting with the Father, a reminder that God's presence is as close as a heartfelt prayer. In his teaching on material possessions, Jesus addressed the potential for wealth to become a distraction from a life devoted to God. He encouraged his followers to seek treasures in heaven, where they would remain safe and eternal. Jesus warned against the trap of materialism, reminding everyone that a heart set on earthly wealth can lead to anxiety and restlessness. He taught that true security is found in a relationship with God, not in worldly possessions. Jesus urged his followers to trust God fully, using the example of the birds of the air and the lilies of the field to illustrate God's provision. Just as God provides for all of creation, he will care for his children. Jesus' words about worry resonated with those who carried the weight of life's challenges. He called for a life free from anxiety, a life anchored in trust and faith. By letting go of worry and placing their trust in God, his followers could experience peace and contentment. Jesus concluded with a teaching on judgment, reminding everyone to look within themselves before criticizing others. He encouraged humility and self-reflection, acknowledging that no one is without fault. Jesus warned that judging others leads to division and conflict, while forgiveness and understanding bring unity and peace. His message was one of grace, urging everyone to extend kindness and compassion. Finally, Jesus closed his sermon by calling his followers to build their lives on a strong foundation. He compared those who hear and obey his words to a wise person who builds their house on solid rock. When storms come, A life grounded in faith and obedience to God remains steadfast. Jesus' teaching was a reminder that the path to peace is found in following his example, living a life rooted in love, integrity, and faith. His words were an invitation to embrace a life of compassion, humility, and trust in God. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount remains a guiding light, offering a path to inner peace and a deeper understanding of God's love.